On a cold February night in the year 2000, while most families slept peacefully through the sound of rain and wind brushing against their homes, a 9-year-old girl made a decision that would leave an entire community searching for answers for decades. Her name was Asha Degree. She lived with her parents and her older brother in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors knew one another and routines rarely changed. Nothing about her life suggested rebellion, distress, or a desire to run away. She was described as cautious, obedient, shy around strangers, and deeply attached to her family. Yet sometime in the early hours before dawn, she quietly left her home and stepped into a storm. That image alone is enough to unsettle anyone. A 4th-grade girl, slight and soft-spoken, opening the door in darkness while the rest of the house sleeps. Outside, the power had flickered earlier due to strong winds. Rain fell steadily. The temperature was cold enough to make breath visible in the air. It was the kind of night when even adults hesitate before stepping outside. But she did not wake her parents. She did not wake her brother. She did not leave a note. She simply walked out. To understand why this case continues to grip the public imagination, you have to understand how ordinary everything seemed before that night. The Degree household was structured and protective. Her parents were known as attentive and strict in a loving way. There were rules about phone calls, rules about sleepovers, rules about safety. Asha was not allowed to wander freely or roam the streets. She did not have a history of sneaking out. She was afraid of dogs and afraid of the dark. She was not known to take risks. Friends later said she was the kind of child who followed directions carefully. Teachers described her as well-behaved and responsible. The day before she disappeared had been unremarkable. It was Valentine's Day weekend. There had been a basketball game earlier where Asha fouled out and seemed upset about it. Some have wondered whether that moment weighed more heavily on her than anyone realized, but nothing indicated that she was deeply distressed. After the game, she went home. The family spent the evening together. There were no arguments reported. No punishments. No dramatic confrontations. It was a normal Sunday evening in a small town. Sometime around 2:30 a.m., her father checked on the children after the power outage. Both Asha and her brother were asleep in their shared room. Everything appeared calm. The house was quiet. He went back to bed. But at some point after that, Asha got up. Investigators believe she packed a small backpack before leaving. The backpack reportedly contained a few personal items and clothing. This detail is critical because it suggests planning. It was not a random midnight wandering. She chose items. She carried them. That implies intention. Yet what intention could a 9-year-old have that would lead her into a storm alone? Around 3:45 to 4:15 a.m., truck drivers traveling along Highway 18 reported seeing a small figure walking south along the roadside. At first, one driver thought it might be an adult woman. But as he got closer, he realized it was a child. Concerned, he turned his truck around to check on her. As he approached, the girl ran off the road and disappeared into the darkness near a wooded area. The driver did not immediately call police, believing perhaps she lived nearby and had run home out of fear. A second motorist reported seeing a child in the same area around the same time. This driver also observed her walking with purpose, not appearing lost, but moving steadily along the highway shoulder despite the rain. When he circled back, she again fled into the woods. Imagine that moment. Headlights cut through the rain. Tires hiss against wet pavement. A truck slows beside a lone child walking with a backpack before dawn. She sees the vehicle hesitate. Instead of asking for help, she runs into the trees. That reaction alone deepens the mystery. Was she afraid of strangers? Likely, yes. That aligns with what everyone knew about her personality. But if she feared strangers, why leave home in the first place? By morning, when her mother went to wake the children for school, Asha's bed was empty. At first, there may have been confusion. Perhaps she was in another room. Perhaps she had gotten up early. But as minutes passed, panic set in. The house was searched. The yard was checked. She was nowhere. Police were called quickly. This was not treated as a runaway in the traditional sense because of her age and personality. Law enforcement recognized immediately that something was deeply wrong. Search teams assembled. Neighbors gathered. Helicopters scanned wooded areas. Dogs were brought in to track scent trails. The search focused heavily on Highway 18 after reports from the truck drivers came in. Officers combed the roadside. They entered the woods where she had been seen running. It was there that searchers reportedly found small items believed to belong to her. Things like candy wrappers and possibly a pencil or marker. These objects felt haunting in their ordinariness. They were the belongings of a child, not someone staging a disappearance. The idea that she left voluntarily is supported by the lack of forced entry and the careful packing of her bag. But voluntary does not mean safe. Voluntary does not mean understood. Children do not typically leave loving homes in the middle of storms without a reason they consider urgent. Speculation grew quickly. Did someone lure her? Was she meeting someone? Did she misinterpret something and believe she needed to go somewhere secretly? Investigators examined her school life. They looked into family connections. They reviewed phone records. Nothing clearly pointed to grooming or contact with a suspicious adult. Yet the possibility lingered. As days turned into weeks, hope battled fear. The community held vigils. Flyers were distributed widely. Her photograph, smiling, bright-eyed, wearing her hair in pigtails, spread across news stations and newspapers. The contrast between that cheerful school portrait and the image of a child alone on a highway in the rain made the story impossible to ignore. Then, about a year and a half later, a breakthrough of sorts occurred. Construction workers discovered her backpack buried in a plastic bag roughly 26 miles north of her home. It had been carefully wrapped and hidden off Highway 18. The backpack was confirmed to be hers. Inside were items that had not originally belonged to her, including a book and possibly clothing not identified as part of her wardrobe. The discovery shifted the tone of the investigation. A buried backpack suggests concealment. It suggests someone else's involvement. Children do not typically bury their own belongings miles away. The wrapping indicated intention to preserve or hide the contents. That detail fueled theories of abduction. Yet no definitive suspect emerged. One of the most unsettling aspects of this case is the dual narrative it creates. On one side, there is the image of independence. A child making a deliberate choice to leave, packing carefully, walking with purpose. On the other side, there is vulnerability. A fourth grader on a rural highway before dawn, exposed to every passing vehicle. Why did she leave? That question has driven endless discussions. Some theorize she may have believed she needed to go on an adventure. Others suggest she may have misunderstood something she read or heard. A book found later in connection with the case sparked speculation about whether fictional stories influenced her imagination. But there has never been solid evidence confirming a fantasy motive. Another theory considers the possibility that she was planning to meet someone she trusted. Children are often warned about strangers, but they are far less likely to fear someone who presents as friendly, kind, or familiar. If someone had built trust quietly over time, would she have felt compelled to go? Still, investigators have never publicly confirmed evidence of grooming. Her family has consistently maintained that she was happy at home and had no reason to run away. They have also emphasized that she was afraid of storms and afraid of the dark, making her choice even more perplexing. It is important to consider the psychological layer here. 9-year-olds are capable of complex emotions, but they do not typically have the cognitive maturity to plan elaborate escapes without external influence. If she left to solve a problem in her mind, what was that problem? Was it something minor that felt overwhelming to a child? Or something more serious she never voiced? The sightings along the highway remain central. 2 independent drivers reported similar observations. The consistency in their accounts strengthens credibility. They both saw a small figure walking south. They both saw her run into the woods when approached. That behavior suggests she did not want assistance from random motorists. She was not seeking help from strangers on the road. She was heading somewhere specific, or at least believed she was. The storm itself adds a cinematic but tragic dimension. Rain reduces visibility. Wind muffles sound. Darkness hides movement. If someone were waiting or watching, the weather would provide cover. Yet it would also make a child uncomfortable and cold. Did she regret leaving moments after stepping outside? Did she hesitate? Or did she feel determined? When her backpack was found buried miles away, investigators faced a chilling possibility that she encountered someone after being seen on the highway. The burial site suggested transportation by vehicle. It implied someone took steps to conceal evidence. But despite forensic testing over the years, no public arrest has been made. Time has passed, but the emotional weight remains heavy. Her parents have continued to advocate for answers. They have marked anniversaries not with closure, but with renewed pleas. The case has been revisited multiple times with new forensic technology. Age progression images have been released, imagining what she might look like as a teenager, then as a young adult. Each progression brings a bittersweet mix of hope and sorrow. Hope that she could still be alive. Sorrow that so much time has been lost. For viewers watching this story unfold decades later, the haunting element is not only that she vanished. It is that she walked away first. That detail creates an almost unbearable tension. We know she left. We know she was seen. We know she carried her backpack. But somewhere between that highway shoulder and the buried bag, the trail fractures. What happened in those missing minutes? Did someone stop and persuade her into a vehicle? Did she reach a predetermined meeting point? Did she realize too late that she was in danger? There is also the unsettling reality that the area she walked along was not heavily populated at that hour. Vehicles passing before dawn are fewer. Witnesses are scarce. Surveillance technology in 2000 was limited compared to today. There were no smartphones tracking movements, no widespread security cameras along rural highways. If a car pulled over and she entered it voluntarily, there may have been no immediate sign of struggle. Her case stands at the intersection of innocence and mystery. A child who appeared safe and loved makes a choice that defies logic. A highway sighting confirms she truly left alone. A buried backpack confirms outside involvement. But the bridge between those facts remains invisible. As investigators continue to review tips even decades later, the public continues to ask the same haunting question. What could compel a 9-year-old to walk into a storm before dawn? Was it curiosity, fear, trust misplaced, or something she believed she had to do? The emotional power of this case lies in its unanswered nature. Every parent imagines checking on their sleeping child, only to find an empty bed. Every driver imagines passing a small figure in the rain and wondering later if they should have done more. Every community imagines how quickly ordinary life can fracture. When construction workers uncovered the buried backpack more than a year after Asha vanished, the discovery felt like both a breakthrough and a blow. It was found along Highway 18, the same corridor where she had last been seen walking in the rain. The location was miles away from her home, wrapped carefully in plastic bags and concealed beneath dirt and debris. This was not an item dropped accidentally. It had been hidden. For investigators, that detail changed everything. The backpack confirmed that Asha did not simply wander into the woods and succumb to the elements. Someone had possession of her belongings long enough to transport and bury them. The wrapping suggested preservation, almost as if whoever hid it wanted it protected from weather and decay. That raised disturbing questions. Why preserve it? Why not destroy it? Why bury it in a place that could eventually be uncovered? Inside the backpack were personal items consistent with what she had packed before leaving home. But there were also objects not clearly linked to her. Among them was a book later identified as McElligott's Pool, by Dr. Seuss. The book had reportedly come from her school library or a related source, though details were not fully public. The presence of the book led to speculation that stories of adventure and imagination may have influenced her thinking. In that particular tale, a boy stands by a small pool imagining grand possibilities beyond what others can see. Some observers wondered whether Asha, disappointed from her recent basketball game or dealing with private childhood emotions, might have imagined a bigger story for herself. But imagination alone does not bury backpacks miles from home. The plastic wrapping implied adult strength and intent. A 9-year-old does not typically carry heavy tools, dig a hole deep enough to conceal evidence, and seal it in protective layers. The burial site was not immediately visible from the road. It required knowledge of the area or deliberate scouting. Whoever placed it there did not want it found quickly. Over time, investigators revisited the case repeatedly. Leads were followed. Tips poured in from across the country. Some claimed sightings in distant states. Others believed they recognized an adult version of Asha years later. Age-progressed images were released, showing how she might look as a teenager, then as a woman in her 20s. Each new image reignited hope among those who believed she could still be alive. The possibility that she survived has always lingered in the background of this case. Unlike many disappearances where clear evidence of violence is found early, here there was ambiguity. The highway sightings confirmed she was alive and walking alone shortly before dawn. The backpack burial suggested outside involvement, but it did not confirm what happened next. Without a body, without a public confession, without forensic evidence tying a suspect conclusively to her disappearance, the case remains suspended between tragedy and uncertainty. Investigators also considered vehicles that might have been in the area that night. Years later, law enforcement released information about a green vehicle seen near the highway around the time she disappeared. Witness descriptions were limited and came forward long after the fact, which complicated reliability. Still, the detail reinforced the theory that someone in a car could have intercepted her. If she was walking with purpose, where was she headed? Some believe she intended to reach a relative's home. Others argue that the distance and direction make that unlikely. She was young. Even if she had an idea in mind, navigating rural highways before dawn in a storm would have been incredibly difficult. Another haunting aspect of this case is her reaction to the truck drivers. When approached, she ran into the woods rather than seeking help. That behavior suggests she was either determined not to be stopped or fearful of strangers interfering with a plan. It indicates agency in that moment. She was not visibly restrained. She was not dragged. She was walking freely. But children can be manipulated without force. If someone had built trust over time, through school, church, neighborhood connections, or even brief repeated encounters, she may have believed she was meeting a friend. Grooming often relies on secrecy framed as something special or exciting. A child might leave quietly because they believe they are doing something important or harmless. Investigators have never publicly confirmed evidence of long-term grooming, but the theory remains plausible. Her family has consistently stated that she did not have unsupervised internet access at the time, and in the year 2000, online communication among children was far less common than it is today. That shifts focus back to in-person contact. It is also important to examine the emotional context. Asha had reportedly been upset after fouling out of her basketball game the day before she vanished. For adults, that may seem minor. For a 9-year-old, emotions can feel overwhelming. But would disappointment over a game trigger a secret departure into a storm? Most experts find that explanation insufficient on its own. There is another layer that makes this case particularly powerful: the weather. She was reportedly afraid of storms. Friends and family described her as cautious. That contradiction intensifies the mystery. Something must have overridden her fear. Either she believed she needed to leave urgently, or she trusted that someone would meet her quickly. The timeline between when she left her house and when she was seen on Highway 18 is narrow. Her father checked on her around 2:30 a.m. Witnesses saw her between approximately 3:45 and 4:15 a.m. That suggests she left shortly after the check. She may have waited until she felt certain everyone was asleep. The road she walked along was not brightly lit. Rain would have blurred headlights and reduced visibility. It is possible that only a handful of vehicles passed during that window. If one of those vehicles stopped and she entered willingly, there may have been no immediate signs of distress to alert anyone. The burial of the backpack miles away suggests movement north after the highway sightings. If she had initially been walking south, as reported, then whoever possessed the bag later traveled in the opposite direction. That shift raises logistical questions. Did she change course? Was she picked up and transported north? Was the burial site chosen randomly or for a specific reason? Over the years, advances in forensic science have renewed hope. DNA analysis techniques have improved dramatically since 2000. Items from the backpack were reportedly tested multiple times. Law enforcement has stated that the case remains active. They have encouraged anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. For her parents, time has not diminished determination. They have spoken publicly about their daughter's personality, emphasizing her gentle nature and the improbability that she would leave without cause. They have expressed belief that someone knows something. Perhaps someone who was too afraid to speak before, perhaps someone whose conscience may weigh heavier with age. Cases involving children often generate sustained emotional engagement because they represent interrupted innocence. In Asha's case, the emotional pull is intensified by that singular image, a 9-year-old walking alone through rain before dawn. It feels cinematic, almost unreal, yet it happened. Witnesses confirmed it. That visual is seared into the collective memory of those who follow the case. Speculation continues across forums and documentaries, but responsible discussion must separate evidence from rumor. What is confirmed is this. She left home voluntarily that night. She was seen walking along Highway 18, and her backpack was later found buried in plastic bags miles away. Everything else remains theory. Some believe she may have encountered someone who offered shelter from the storm. Others suspect she was targeted deliberately. There are those who hold on to the hope that she survived and built a new identity somewhere, though such scenarios become less statistically likely as years pass without verified contact. Still, there are cold cases that have been solved decades later. Advances in forensic genealogy have reopened investigations once thought impossible to crack. Communities have witnessed long-awaited arrests in cases older than this one. That possibility keeps the story alive in public consciousness. The psychological tension of this case lies in its unanswered middle. We know the beginning. A quiet house, a sleeping family, a child rising silently. We know a piece of the middle. Headlights illuminating a small figure walking steadily along a wet highway. We know a fragment of the aftermath. A backpack wrapped carefully and buried far from home. But the crucial turning point, what happened between those moments, remains invisible. Every anniversary prompts renewed appeals. Investigators remind the public that even the smallest detail can matter. A memory of a vehicle parked strangely. A neighbor acting differently after that night. A comment overheard years ago that suddenly seems significant. For viewers today, the open-ended nature invites reflection. What would drive a child who feared storms to step into one alone? Did she believe she was solving a problem? Was she protecting someone? Was she chasing an idea planted by someone she trusted? And perhaps most haunting of all, if those truck drivers had managed to reach her before she ran into the woods, would history be different? There is no confirmed resolution. No courtroom conclusion. No official narrative tying every piece together. Only fragments. Only possibilities. Yet the story endures because it challenges assumptions about safety, about childhood, about what we think we understand. It reminds us that mysteries do not always announce themselves with chaos. Sometimes they begin with silence, a door opening softly in the early morning hours while the world sleeps. More than 2 decades later, the question remains suspended in that stormy darkness. Where was she going? Who did she meet? And what truly happened after she stepped off that highway shoulder and disappeared into the trees? If someone out there holds even one missing piece of this puzzle, the passage of time does not erase its value. Truth has a way of surfacing, even after years buried like a backpack beneath the soil. Until that day comes, the image remains. A small figure walking steadily into rain, vanishing beyond the reach of headlights, leaving behind a mystery that refuses to fade. Let's meet in the comments to know your thoughts and if this story moved you and you want more deep, emotional true crime cases told with respect and detail. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep uncovering the stories that still deserve answers.